As always, we're joined by the wonderful Sam Crosby to argue nothing but common sense that everyone will agree with. Is that a better intro for you?
That's lovely.
You always whinge when I do.
That's lovely.
The bloke will, of course, point out that most of what he has to say is wrong. Is none other than Senator Matt Canavan, who's joining us now as well. And he will, of course, be the one with all of the sanity. But we'll see what happens. So, latest polls, take your pick. Albo's struggling. Now, at this moment, if there was an election, there'd be a minority government and, you know, we'll take winning over anything. But Matt Canavan, do you think that people have started to turn in a fashion where a significant number of those who changed in 22 have started to change back? Or as we saw with the Catherine wheel of we're doing something about cost of living that really was too little too late tax cuts that moved some numbers a little bit around in January, gets to move back towards Labor when they're using 40 million of our dollars to ram it down our throat that our government really cares?
Well, I think this poll shows pretty much the status quo or the state of play at the moment, that the government is struggling and it's a pretty close situation. I don't think it's unclear why the government is struggling. You've got a Prime Minister today who seems to think the biggest issue in the country is misinformation when he is the biggest peddler of misinformation in this nation. He promised the Australian people at the last election that he would cut their power bills by $275 and he hasn't done so. That's why he's struggling. He's struggling because Australian families are struggling under his policies and they want him to focus on those struggles, and instead he's distracted by all these other issues. So look, that's not rocket science in my mind, but I would also say on our side of the coin that we've still got work to do too, the vote for minor parties remains high, and to form government, to be in an election winning position over the next year, we have to fight really hard to get the support of people back. So that's a challenge for us, but I definitely think the next election's there for the taking.
Sam, is the assumption of Labor people that the Teals don't move, so therefore Dutton can't get close, so we can lose some bark, but we end up winning anyway? And would that be a dangerous thing for people to think?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is what they're thinking, and if it is, they are very, very mistaken. Look, the great fear with Peter Dutton is that people think he's unelectable, right? And in that instance, that's the point where people are free to then go and register a protest vote. Albanese is a long-time political animal. He's aware of this. He is taking it absolutely very seriously. Look, I guess there's 2 points to say about the polls today. The first, and I guess the big one, is I'd still prefer to be us than them, right? I'd still prefer to be in the government's shoes than the opposition shoes. The second point is, you don't win grand finals in April, right? So we've still got another, 10 months, year to go before the next election, something in that order. The money's only just started to flow from the housing fund. Matt made a point earlier about the electricity fare. The power bill started to come down. They're scheduling another, X% that they're hoping that it's going to come down. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. But there's still a little bit of runway to go before people, start to feel that it's.
But this is my point, right? Which is that and I remember this from the last mob, right? Which is that very easily people can get distracted by the big numbers that they see in Canberra, right? So. The cost of stage street's $109 billion, and if you 10x that, it's $5 trillion. But when you actually get down to $14 a week, it doesn't feel like a great needle mover, right? Yes, you're right about directions of things, but if it's not a sizable change, then again, they will stand up there on budget days and say, look at this wonderful 35 million this and 25 million that. But if it doesn't actually connect to where people are and about changing their own life circumstances, then I think the government is sort of talking to the press gallery, not actually connecting with the people saying, hey, can you do something for me?
Look, it's a fair point. I mean, I've always been of the view that tax cuts are gone within a couple of weeks, correct, right? You get a couple of pays and then you bank in that whatever amount of money is and it's gone. My personal view is spend it on housing. I've said this all the way through. Put another zero behind the amount that you're spending on housing and actually do something to get people, the 100 and whatever thousand people that are sleeping rough each night, do something to get them in a home, and that's something that people will reward you for.
Well, I would also argue, Matt, too, that when homelessness is the highest that it's been, when 3.7 million people are having trouble feeding themselves, I think it's unconscionable for a government to be in a budget surplus when that money in some way should be being delivered directly to the charity sector. I mean, as I spoke about before, they spent $40 million on ads telling us that too little, too late tax cuts are great. They only gave $15 million extra to the charity sector, who are the ones actually dealing with the coldface, and the coldface is getting colder by the day.
Well, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time, Paul. I think we do have to balance our budget because one of the reasons that at least some people are struggling to find housing is because of the very high interest rates we've got, and that is a consequence of too much government spending and borrowing that we did over the last few years through COVID. So if we continue that, that'll only exacerbate that issue. So we have to balance the budget, but what we should be doing is looking to cut the government waste that clearly occurs and free that up to help those people that are struggling. And more needs to be done, of course, on the big gorilla of all of that is the NDIS. Too many people are getting money off that public teat that don't need it. Plenty of people do need it, but there's plenty of people who do not, and there needs to be greater focus on that so we can free up that money to help those people really struggling.